Religion has actually convinced people that there's an invisible man living in the sky who watches everything you do every minute of every day. And the invisible man has a special list of 10 things he does not want you to do. And if you do any of these 10 things, he has a special place full of fire and smoke and burning and torture and anguish where he will send you to live and suffer and burn and choke and scream and cry forever and ever till the end of time.
But he loves you.
Why hello my fellow apes. Welcome to the last in my series of comments on Dr. William Lane Craig's absolute best refutations of the best atheist arguments.
Well, that's really stupid, isn't it?
I've so far covered Craig's response to Ricky Gervais, Richard Dawkins and Neil deGrasse Tyson. Twice. But I've saved who many will consider the best for last.
No contest.
The American stand-up comedian, actor, social critic and author, George Carlin.
You know what I say we ought to do at these churches? Tax them!
So, says I, let's get straight to it. After viewing the opening clip in this video,
But he loves you.
here's how Craig responded.
Well, Kevin, this isn't serious critique. This is comedy.
Oh, well, if it's just comedy, then in for a penny, in for a pound, I say. There we go. Cameron is now officially Kevin.
Well, Kevin, this isn't serious critique. This is comedy. Indeed, it's mockery.
Actually, it's both. The two are not mutually exclusive. One can express a very serious critique through the vehicle of humour. In fact, comedy has long been recognised as an extremely effective way in which to convey truths, since it both lightens the mood and it can be hard to distinguish from banter. A critique laced with humour tends to be received in the moment as a joke, but as something very serious to reflect upon in private later.
Indeed, it's mockery. And so he sets up a caricature which he then makes fun of. The Christian conception of God is not a man in the sky. It's a transcendent, personal creator and designer of the universe who is the locus and source of absolute moral goodness.
Carlin obviously knew that Christians don't believe in a literal man in the sky, and so yes, he was setting up a caricature for comedic purposes, but his critique wasn't at all predicated on the tangibility of God. It was predicated on the contradiction of an all-loving God infinitely punishing someone for a finite crime.
Forever and ever till the end of time.
But he loves you.
And hence his critique very much applies to contemporary Christianity, and while we're at it, it applies to Islam too. Carlin was mocking the divine judicial system due to its logical inconsistency. To hammer home his point, consider the following two criminals. Marcus Brutus, a Roman senator who along with his conspirators assassinated Julius Caesar, and Genghis Khan, a Mongolian warlord who was responsible for the death of up to 40 million people. In principle, at least, we can represent these crimes numerically. Brutus has, say, a criminal record of 1, and Khan has a criminal record of 40 million. You may disagree with this assignment, and if pushed, I probably would too, but I'm sure you get the point. Now, the scales of justice dictate that we issue a punishment that fits the crime, but here lies the contradiction of issuing an infinite punishment, hell, for a finite crime. 1 minus infinity is minus infinity. That is, by definition, infinitely disproportionate. That is not justice, and it certainly isn't mercy. It is, in fact, grotesquely immoral. The same is true, of course, of 40 million minus infinity. To quote Blaise Pascal, the finite is annihilated in the presence of the infinite and becomes a pure nothing. Or as the biochemist Isaac Asimov put it, infinite torture can only be punishment for infinite evil, and I don't believe that infinite evil can be said to exist even in the case of Hitler. This was the critique that Carlin was expressing, and it is a very serious critique indeed. The rationale behind an infinite hell is ludicrous. I would in fact go further than Carlin and say that an omnipotent God that sanctions or permits an infinite punishment for a finite crime is the devil.
And the list of 10 things, I take it that that's a reference to the 10 Commandments. And it's neither the teaching of Old Testament Judaism nor Christianity that if you break any of the 10 Commandments, God is going to send you to burn in hell and to torture you.
Well, that depends on your interpretation. I mean, I'll play now, for instance, just two preachers voicing an opposing view.
And I think 2 Thessalonians 1, verse 8 through 9 is clarifying. It says this: He'll punish those who do not know and obey the gospel of our Lord Jesus. They will be punished with everlasting destruction and shut out from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his might.
Heaven and hell are a matter of divine judgment. And divine judgment is actually a good thing. It's something we long for. And in the end, God will rule justly. He will execute judgment.
But in either case, whether an all-powerful God condemns you to an infinite punishment himself, or he stands idle as an infinite punishment descends upon you, it follows that he cannot be omnibenevolent.
Rather, what Christianity is like, if I can give an analogy, is that it's like a condemned criminal who has been found guilty of a capital crime and sentenced to death and is on death row. And then the governor or the president, out of mercy, bestows upon him the offer of a complete pardon for his crime, which the guilty person is then either free to accept or to reject.
In regards to Craig equating capital punishment with hell, which for the record is the standard apologetic response against this objection, I insist that we listen to a sentence from Christopher Hitchens.
I've been to North Korea. It is the most revolting and utter and absolute and heartless tyranny the human species has ever evolved. But at least you can fucking die and leave North Korea.
Indeed, by equating the finite punishment of execution with the infinite punishment of hell, Craig has completely missed Carlin's point, just as he missed Gervais's point, and Dawkins' point, and Tyson's point, twice. In fact, it seems to me that Craig has made a career out of missing the point. I mean, he misses the point so damn often that I'm going to have to add a dodge card to the expansion of Debunked.
And if he rejects it, then of course he will fall back onto the just desert of the justice system, and the sentence will be carried out. So it's entirely up to us whether or not we want to accept God's loving and gracious pardon for our wrongdoing, or whether we choose to reject his love and forgiveness.
There's an illuminating theme that I first heard on the Atheist Experience, known as God the Mob Boss, and it very much applies here.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
In The Godfather, the mob boss makes an offer that the film studio can't refuse. His ultimatum is that they either give his godson the lead role of an upcoming film, or he won't prevent bad things from happening to them. Likewise, according to the mythos, the mob boss of Christianity and Islam, God, has made us an offer we can't refuse. He says, look, listen, you can either accept my loving and gracious pardon, or I won't prevent bad things from happening to you. You see, you've been sentenced to hell, and it's entirely up to you.
It's entirely up to us
whether or not you accept my mercy.
Out of mercy.
It's not the lash they fear. It is my divine power. That I'm a generous God. I can make you rich beyond all measure.
Yes, yes, he continues, by virtue of me being omnibenevolent, I love you, and by virtue of me being omnipotent, I could save you from the hell that I've created. But I won't. Not until you get on your knees, pretend that I exist, and hallow my name. Unless you grovel, I will abandon you to a fate infinitely worse than any crime you could possibly commit.
Where he will send you to live and suffer and burn and choke and scream and cry forever and ever till the end of time.
But he loves you.
Furthermore, here's some other divine logic to get your head around. Due to the nature of infinity, whether you end up in hell because you're a murderous warlord, stole a loaf of bread to feed your starving family, or simply fell in love with someone of the same sex, the result is exactly the same: eternal fire and brimstone. Whether your crime has a numerical value of 1 or 40 million, the sentence is the same, minus infinity. How's that for justice? When those that preach this nonsense presume to lecture us on morality, mockery is quite frankly the kindest response at our disposal.
Whether we choose to reject his love and forgiveness.
Yeah, I was going to, well, before I add to that, I wanted to just point out that you called me Kevin instead of Cameron, I think out of habit.
Yes.
Okay, the fun's over, kids. Let's rein it in. I'm going to leave you with the star of the show, Carlin, and funny enough, with the very words he said prior to the clip that we looked at. But before doing so, I'd just like to sign off myself by saying thank you kindly for the view, and an extra special thank you to my wonderful patrons and those of you who have supported the channel via other means. Without you, this series wouldn't exist. Like God. Damn it. Oh, I was doing so well. I made a joke at the end and now it can't be taken seriously.
But in the bullshit department, a businessman can't hold a candle to a clergyman. Because I gotta tell you the truth, folks. I gotta tell you the truth. When it comes to bullshit, big time, major league bullshit, you have to stand in awe of the all-time champion of false promises and exaggerated claims, religion. No contest. No contest.